Talking about DuckTales again today, we have Day of the Only Child, an episode in which Dewey decides that they're going to have a whole day where the three boys pretend to be only children and do the kinds of things that only children can do. And this is dumb. Like, the premise, it's a little dumb. Because Huey needed his siblings for something today anyway. And I don't even think Dewey is a big enough asshole to arbitrarily pick a day when one of his brothers needed him to do this, when it didn't have to be today. Like, it didn't have to be that specific day that he did this. And also, the thing that he wanted to do as an only child ended up being shoot a fake talk show in a distant wing of the house, which, like, he's audacious enough to do that when his brothers are around anyway, so it just seems silly. But it's an excuse to get the boys in 3 different locations so we can have kind of a episode of vignettes. Kind of like one of those mini episode compilations that we would see in something like Futurama or Gravity Falls. Except that all of these stories are happening at the same time, and the resolutions to them do all happen in the same place. And it's cute. It's a cute episode. Like, Dewey's talk show thing was funny. Louie's thing of, now that he can pretend that he's Scrooge's sole heir, he can get in to mingle with this super rich kid who lives nearby, was pretty funny. And I really liked Huey's thing of 3 of the Beagle Boys show up and want to try to kidnap him at a Junior Woodchucks event. And he ends up befriending 2 of them. But because they're so dysfunctional, they don't know how to actually interact with a person that they like except to be subservient to them. And so he ends up wanting to get rid of them, even though he, like, genuinely helps them not suck as much, and they actually genuinely appreciate it. Going so far as to, as they're learning the skills that he's teaching them, accidentally screw over one of their other brothers multiple times. It was all very good and all very chuckle-worthy. And every single one of these 3 stories ended up with the boys realizing that they're stronger together. Like, Huey's whole thing was that he needed 2 other people to do the thing he's doing. That's the premise of his thing. That's why he works with the Beagle Boys in the first place. He's willing to literally risk kidnapping or death in order to get a scout badge. Because he's a child and children don't understand priorities. Louie ends up realizing that the rich kid he wanted to mingle with is the worst. That he, like, tries to, like, literally take possession of people, like, as in make them his possessions. And man, the character just, that character just really weirded me out in general. Like, they did a really good job making this guy come off like an absolute creep. It was great. And Dewey would have died to a killer robot if his brothers hadn't saved him. Also, he probably could have used a couple more people working with him on his fake talk show. Like, people to be the guests, for example. But, honestly, I think Dewey, aside from him making this particular day, the day that they did this, being kind of stupid, got the short end of the stick in this one. Like, in the end, they need Huey's technical know-how and Louie's ability to talk to people and talk people out of stuff to get out of various different situations that they're in. But what did Dewey bring to the party at the end? Like, he had a robot that shot toy missiles. Like, I guess he's supposed to be like the quote-unquote leader of the group. He does at one point mention that he's the glue that holds his brothers together. And while it's framed like he's just being self-absorbed when he says it, maybe that's what they're going for here. And that would track because it isn't until he shows up at the end, until his thing converges with the other 2 things, that they're all able to come together and stop all of the various things that are happening to them. But if that's what they're going for, he really should have contributed something more to the resolution, and it didn't feel like he did. There were a couple of other interesting things in here, though. Like, Launchpad had some stuff that was super funny. He's a woodchuck scout leader for some reason, and to explain the fact that he's this thing that we've never seen him be, and that he is woefully unqualified to be. Instead of like giving us some weird, convoluted, stupid explanation or just not explaining it at all, they explain that he's a scout leader because he wrecked a bus. Which is absurd. It's so absurd. But that's the show. It's the kind of absurdity you see in the show, and it fits his character perfectly. It was very, very funny. And also, Webby's in this. Webby was really good in this. Webby's really good in any episode she's in. But, like, it kind of dipped into her character thing from the very beginning of the show again. Like, she was so excited to have the boys in her life because she wanted siblings of her own. She wanted a family of her own because she never really felt like she had anybody. And she mentions how great it would be to be a triplet here. And it made me think of something. Wasn't there, like, I don't know if they ever showed up in the original DuckTales, but wasn't there in, like, this loose, expanded Disney continuity that the DuckTales stuff takes aesthetic from? Like a counterpart trio to the boys of, like, girl triplets? Kind of like Alvin and the Chipmunks has the girl chipmunks. You know? It would have been really interesting if instead of Webby just being her own character, they had sort of rolled the concept of her in with the concept of them and created kind of like a counter to the three boys. That would have made for a really interesting dynamic. Three characters who were all kind of isolated by their lifestyle, kept in that house for years, and now they have these three boys to interact with. That could have been very interesting. Maybe we'll get those characters later, though, and they'll have an interesting dynamic with the boys then, or something. I don't know. It just made me think, made me think of those characters for the first time in literal years, and also, again, like I said, digs back into that whole hang-up of Webby's. She's worried when she sees that the boys are even just pretending not to be family anymore, because she feels like if they stop being family, she'll lose them as her sort of found family. And so she has a horse in the race of getting them back together, too. It was kind of odd, though, because one of the antagonists of the episode is a security drone that I guess Scrooge bought for the house. Webby ends up screwing it up, and that's why it attacks Dewey and herself. That felt a little out of character for her. It was kind of weird. Was it just because she was so worried that she did that stupid thing? Like, it's not like she isn't a reckless character, but she tends to be fairly knowledgeable about most things. But instead she, like, screws up this really dangerous robot so that she can hide in it for some reason. It was very weird. Like, there are certainly things in this episode that I feel like they could have done better and they could have explained better. Conceits that I feel like could have been less conceity. But overall, it was a fun episode with three equally fun, converging storylines that came to a pretty exciting conclusion, and each of which was pretty funny on its own. Not the best episode of the show, but a pretty good one nonetheless. That said, as per usual, guys, what did you think of the DuckTales 2017 episode, The Day of the Only Child? If you have seen it, let's get a discussion going in the comments section down below. And while you're down there, you might as well like the video, share it with anyone else who you think would enjoy my content, subscribe if you haven't. You can also check out links to my various social medias, as well as the many ways you can help out the channel. Those will be in the video description, but either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.